Hi, Internet. Welcome to The What Else Show presents Exclusively Admirers. I'm your host, Bethany, and I talk to people I admire about people, places, and things that they admire. My guest today is Bryan Asher. Bryan is a published author and master world builder, creator of the Intercontinents universe. You can find Bryan's work at the links in the description. You can also support the charities that are near and dear to Bryan's heart, the Blue Hero Project and the Seattle Police Foundation, by visiting the links in the description to show your support. Now, without further ado, please enjoy a conversation with Bryan Asher. Bryan, first of all, I really admire you. You are what I would consider an expert world builder, I think,
Oh, I appreciate that.
at this point. And I know you also have your own YouTube channel, and you've reviewed books, and you've done some unboxing. And I really enjoy watching your unboxing. I think it's really fun. And I really admire you. So this, I will tell you. So I have your book right here.
Okay. Oh, wow, that's the original cover too.
Yep, the
That's like the
original.
old school cover.
Yes.
Wow.
So, I actually don't read a lot of fiction, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm really excited to have you on today. You really kind of inspired me to not let go of my passions and interests, and like I said, kind of getting this podcast off the ground is something that I really wanted to do for a while. So let's talk about you. So I have a question that'll kind of kick things off a little bit. So who is somebody that you admire and why? So it could be a real person, it could be a fictional person, it could be a place, it could be a real place, a fictional place. But kind of talk about your focuses of admiration kind of in your own life, and kind of how that drives your creativity.
Sure. Yeah. When it comes to writing specifically, the authors that really grab me are the ones who have put out a lot of content, but that are generally at a high quality. So I was a big fan of John Bellairs growing up. He's not very well known, but he wrote these like young reader fiction books. They're almost like pulps, and each one is just a little self-contained story, generally around like spooky themes, like hidden treasure or a ghost or a warlock, like all these cool things that for a young boy it's cool to see, and they're all adventures with like these younger kids who go on these treasure hunts or whatever. And I loved the amount of content he put. I liked that they were all really entertaining, and I just had a lot of respect for someone who could create so many stories with, he had probably like 2 or 3 sets of characters total, but he had probably 4 or 5 different mysteries with each of those characters. And so that really stuck with me, that he was able to do that. And I think it's a shame that more people don't know who he is and his legacy. He is one of the YouTube videos I made. And it's funny, that one has probably received the most comments. Like, my channel's not very big. And he has resonated with so many readers that even though his books, you can't really find them on shelves anymore, they don't get reprinted. He, as a person, still resonated with readers so much that they look for anything or anyone who's speaking about his content, and somehow they find my video and comment on it. And I'm like one of the only people who has a video about him or his books. And I went really in depth on like the whole gamut of stuff he's written, mainly the younger reader stuff. He does have some adult fiction that I unfortunately never got around to reading and is pretty hard to find. Maybe one day I'll go get those. But yeah, he's one. And then there's obviously a few others. I would say Brandon Sanderson and R.A. Salvatore are probably 2 authors that most people would be familiar with, that are more current and that have a lot of content. And again, same type of thing. Like, Sanderson's constantly coming out with new content. It's usually at a very high quality. And same with R.A. Salvatore. Like, R.A. Salvatore, he's written 20 some odd books or more, mainly with one set of characters, but he just continued to write and create. And I always had appreciation for people that really looked at it as something where they had like an obligation to readers, and they had an obligation to continue to create high quality content. And I'm sure, as you're aware, there's a few authors out there who have started series that are very popular that just don't get completed. So to me, I have a lot of respect for guys that just continue to push forward and look at it more like it's a promise to readers versus something of an indulgence to themselves.
You kind of touched on this a little bit, but are there any qualities that you see in these writers that you admire? And like I said, you kind of touched on it a little bit, that you really try to apply to maybe your own creative process or your own life in general, or how are they really kind of actively inspiring maybe your creative process and how you write?
I would say dedication's a big one, and it's something I'm still working on myself. I have 3 books out now, and I did a comic book that was like a short comic book, but I like to have something every year, and so I'm trying to ramp back up again and get something for this year. And so to me, it's just dedication. The fact that they really just stay in the pocket and they keep creating and writing, and it's not just to come out with content. They, are creating genuine content that people are enjoying. But I just appreciate their dedication, and that in a weird way, it's like I kind of gravitate towards the people that have done well and are successful, but maybe don't take themselves too seriously. Like they don't look at themselves as like an artiste or whatever. Like their prose are a little more simple, but their work is really grand, and they make big, epic fiction. But they do it at a consistent pace and are dedicated to their fans and are dedicated to their characters. Like they just want to keep creating more stories with these characters, like they're real to them. And I appreciate that, because when you create characters, they start feeling real to you, and you just want to know what happens to them. You want to learn more about them, so you're serving them as well. But yeah, those are a few things I really admire about them.
Have you ever had the opportunity to meet in person anybody that you really admire, or any personal experiences with them that you'd want to share?
Sure. Yeah, I actually did get to meet Brandon Sanderson and R.A. Salvatore. Um, I was fortunate. R.A. Salvatore was coming to a Comic-Con. This is before I had finished my book. And I was, writing, and I was attending as a fan. So I actually got to have him sign a copy. It's on that wall somewhere. I think it's one of the outward-facing ones. I think it's that one up there on its side with the guy on top. But the Driss Legacy collection, I had him sign that, and I told him, how his writing inspired me. And then there's a quote he had. He had said multiple interviews that he writes to make sense of the world. And as he grows older and learns more, it's like his writing helps him make sense of the world. And so I told him that really resonated with me, and I thought that was a really interesting way to portray his writing. And he said that was really cool. And then I told him I was working on something, and he actually shared his email address with me, which was really cool. And then I proceeded to lose that email address.
Oh no!
So I was never able to send him a copy of my book. I had it on a phone. I had one of those Galaxy Note phones, so I pulled it out and I wrote it down on the little note thing, because that phone, I really liked it. I liked the little pen and stuff. I used it a lot, and I remember that phone broke. And I went to try and get the stuff off of it, and it was one of the few notes, the notes are saved like images. It was one of the few notes that wasn't there. So I guess it was meant to be to not send it to him, but probably good though, because your first book, you're still learning, and yeah. But that was kind of a funny little anecdote that I met him and got his email and never got to send it. And then I did meet Brandon Sanderson at a convention as well, mainly just to get a signature. I did give him a copy of my second book. I told him, I know you're super busy, you won't be able to read this, but just want to give it to you because I'm a big fan. And he was super generous. He was very, very gracious about it, and that was really cool because he didn't have to be. So,
wow, that's amazing. I mean, except for losing his email address. I'm so sorry.
Sometimes I figure I'm it's meant to be. So.
Do you feel like your sense of admiration for all these different authors and creatives has kind of evolved over time? Has it
That's a good question. I don't know if it's necessarily evolved. I think the only thing I would say is, I guess with John Belair's, it's just interesting to see like someone be very influential and very successful, and yet eventually become forgotten, except for by like big diehard fans. So it's just interesting to see that. But I don't know if anything else has changed, in a major way for those two people. No.
Is there something or someone that you really admire that might surprise people?
Oh, that's a good one. I would say, honestly, there's a recent experience I had with the French comic book scene that was really, really inspiring. We went to Paris for a wedding, and while we were there, I had heard from a few YouTube channels that the French comic scene is actually really prolific and really profitable, and actually does a lot better than ours, and in some ways better than Japan's. And so a lot of people don't know that. Like, people are very familiar with American comics, or they're familiar with manga. And even though French comics is extremely successful, we don't really hear much about it here. So I looked up on my phone to find some stores, and there was an entire block had like comic stores all up and down the block, which was crazy. So with the area we were in, it's like there's the big river, and then across the river was like the more modern side that was like, updated and normal, and then the side we were on was like the really like cool, like sleepy Paris side that you like would want to see, like that really cool side with all the restaurants, and it feels, like the preserved historic side. And it was like near the university. So I ended up going up and down this block, and they had all these different comic book stores, and they also had manga stores, and they had American comic stores, and like classic French comic stores, and new French comic stores. And so I was going into all these different places, and it was crazy. Like, their manga selection was like bigger and more robust than ours. Like, most of the stuff we have is generally for teenagers. They had all the stuff for adults. And then their actual comics themselves are really cool. They're printed in these big, large, oversized books, and each book is like a pretty good chunk of a story, and they're really affordable. So you get this giant hardback for like $12. And they're usually around like 30 pages or 40 pages. And they take about 6 months to a year to make each one. So there's a lot of dedication with it. And also their genres are much wider than ours. So, that's like superheroes, maybe some zombies. Over there, it's like historical fiction, crime fiction, romance, hard sci-fi, light sci-fi, high fantasy, low fantasy, westerns, horror, spy fiction, anything you could think of that you would find in a bookstore, like in an actual bookstore, you will find in a comic store there. Like, they've even redone Pillars of the Earth as a comic. So like, they'll take well. Yeah. So I cannot read or speak French. However, I bought probably like a stack of like 10 books. So this is Pillars of the Earth as a French comic. This is the first volume. They came out with 2 versions, a normal and a deluxe. The art is really, really cool. Yeah, it's like very very detailed.
Oh my gosh.
And intricate. Yeah, and then like they'll put extras in the back too. So this one is like almost 100 pages. Yeah, it's like just right around 100 pages. And they even have like in the back like a bunch of info for Ken Follett's other books.
Oh my gosh.
and the timeline of them, like when they came out and stuff. Like the order you're supposed to read them in, because I know they're part of that like series or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and so they'll make these like beautiful, impressive comics that are in all types of genres. And this is actually my wife's favorite book of all time. I've never read it, so I thought it'd be really cool to buy.
Good. It's so good.
Yeah, I eventually want to read it, but yeah, this was really cool. And to me, I was just so blown away that this was like front and center when you walked in the store. It had just come out, so like this, like they take it seriously. Like, they look at this like you would walk into a literature section in a bookstore. Like, they don't look at it the same way we do. It's really impressive. And I actually interviewed an artist who did a different series, And it was really cool talking to him about their process. It's completely different. Like they really look at it like fine art. They don't look at it the same way we do. It's more like pulp fiction.
And that's so
And some of
crazy.
them are on Kindle too. So you can buy some of them on Kindle in English. Sorry to interrupt you there.
Oh, no, please.
Yeah.
Oh, that is amazing. And that's so funny because like I don't read a lot of fiction, and that's actually one of my absolute favorite books, as somebody who's obsessed with history and also architecture. So it's
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
it's the perfect blend of both. And the first time I read it, I was actually working for a construction company. And we were building, this huge structure. And so it was like, it just felt so, so timely.
Yeah, they
That's
do all kinds of
incredible.
stuff. It's cool. Like if you're into Game of Thrones type of fantasy, there's one called Servitude, and they have that one on Kindle in English. Like you can just read it like on an iPad. So if you find the idea of this type of stuff fascinating, you can track it down. You got to look pretty hard, but a lot of it is available through some of the online comic reading platforms.
Is there anything you wish you would have known then that you know now?
That's a really good question. I think one would be the editor I had for my third book. I wish I'd found him sooner, just because I think he does a really good job. Um, I would say, man, that would be one. Also, my new cover designer. I wish I would have found them sooner, I guess. Um, those would be two that I could think of off the top of my head. But I guess part of it is I feel like I have so much to learn still, and the landscape has changed a lot. Um, I guess the only other thing I would have told myself is like start writing sooner, just start getting it out quicker, um, because there's nothing like momentum creatively. Like when you have momentum on a book creatively, there's nothing like it. And also, I guess the other thing I would say is maybe my outline process. I think my outline process has gotten a lot better, and I'm better at pausing when there's a gap in knowledge in my brain. Like if I'm writing and I realize, like, oh, I haven't really uncovered that piece of the world or uncovered this connection or really written it out. And so I've been taking a lot more notes on that stuff rather than just relying on it in my brain, in more permanent places on my computer. Like today I was writing and I've been using OneNote to try and track some of this stuff so I have a place to go back and find it all, because usually I'll just have to go open a book and do like a word search and like look for all of it, and it's a lot tougher that way. So I guess being diligent about note keeping and yeah, those would be a few things. So what's funny is like when it comes to making, sci-fi or fantasy or horror, those are the three genres I've done. You're creating these worlds from nothing, and so it can get complicated, and you want to really keep track of all this stuff. And it was funny. I was listening to an R.A. Salvatore interview, and he was talking about having to keep continuity and not mess up some of the lore, and they didn't really have a great way of keeping track of all this stuff because he's using either pretty basic word processing or typewriting or whatever. Back then it wasn't the same as it is now. You didn't have the same ability to catalog everything. And what they used to do for when he worked at Wizards is they'd have somebody who was just like a big fan who would have to not necessarily a big fan, but they would have somebody hired who would be tasked with like reading all the books and trying to keep track of that, like for the authors as like an extra editor piece. And that didn't always work out really well because it's like they're dropping off all these books on this poor guy's doorstep. And so what he would do in the early days of the internet is he would go on the message boards as like a fake account, and he would ask questions to like the super fans, and be like, hey, does anyone remember how X person resolved all these issues? And then like all these super fans had all the answers, so he would just go on those message boards and get all of his like continuity straightened out by just bothering the really big time fans, which I always thought was really cool. I'm like, that's crafty, like that's smart, because they know it. And so yeah, I appreciate that type of ingenuity.
Wow, that's brilliant. And also hilarious. I can't imagine having to keep track of all of that, of the lore and the interconnectedness of the characters and the places and the events and like the chain of events and like what happened first? Did this happen first? Did this happen next? Like that. Yeah, that's crazy. I've tried to write. Like I can't. I can't. I gave up, Brian. I gave up. It's not for me. I'm more of a promoter than a writer. I'm not very creative. How has your admiration for all of these creative forces that you have discovered, how has your admiration for them changed your perspective on life or your creative process? You kind of touched on it a little bit, but was there any like a profound moment where you really kind of changed your perspective on something because of somebody that you admired?
You're asking how if my creative process has changed by hearing something they've said? I don't. I mean, I don't know if anything specifically they said. I mean, I know having 2 kids now has changed things quite a bit. That's made things different. Yeah, I guess part of it would be, I would say one thing that they're really good at is assigning a schedule and sticking to that. I haven't always been on a specific daily schedule, more like hey, I give myself sort of a deadline if I really want to be done by like X timeline. Like I'd like to have my next book done by like late February, early March. But I think that would be a big thing, is they're very smart about, like Sanderson, every day he has his like hours that he does it. And to me, I think that's really smart, because now writing, I've been, busy with work for quite a bit, and I've been kind of out of it. And so getting back in and being able to write consistently for multiple pages without your brain like doing other things could be really tough. It's like a muscle, like you got to start building it back up. So I'm starting with like 5 push-ups, then 10 push-ups, so having those like consistent scheduled writings is really good. And then I actually have, I don't know if I have it on me here. I don't think I do, but my friend she's traditionally published in fantasy, but she came out with a book. It's like this tall book, and it has all these tools on story development. So it has multiple different types of story progression, like how you would format a story, whether it's like hero's journey or story circle, like all these different styles of outlining, which was cool because it helped me be like, oh, okay, here's a good way to really put this together. She has these little interview sheets in it that you can interview your own characters to get to learn like more about them, which was really helpful. And I've been using it for my next book. And I think it's called the Sci-Fi Fantasy Writer's Bible or something like that. It's like this brown book, but it's really useful. Her name's MJ Kuhn. I appreciate that tool, and I've used that a lot recently. When I'm at Comic-Cons and I have downtime, I'll go on there and I'll just start writing in there different things, interviewing characters or plot points, and then tracking my progression. Like every day that I write, I'll cross off a little thing. So those have been some nice tools I've picked up recently.
Oh, that's awesome. You sound very organized.
I sound organized.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's tough because it's like I have processes. It's more like getting back on track and executing them, and then also trying to like fit processes in when like my income doesn't solely come from my books right now. Obviously, that'd be the dream. So it's a situation where it's like if that's all I did, then I could execute these processes and have multiple books out a year. But that's not the case yet. So I have to kind of fit those processes in where time dictates. Honestly, usually now during the holidays, it used to be on the summer. I would write a lot during the summer. Now it's more during the holidays because my work slows down. And then I just have a lot more downtime, not out as much. People are more hunkered down, so not as much socializing. So those like November, December, early January, that's like when I really get to write quite a bit.
As a creative who is probably going to wield influence on other people, and I'm sure someday I'll be I'll be interviewing somebody and they're going to say Bryan Asher really inspired me. Oh, I know that's going to happen. So, is there any advice or lessons that you have that you'd want to pass on to maybe people who are going to come after you and admire you as a writer and a creative?
Oh, I would say the things I would do would be um again, the same things that were kind of given to me is dedication. Like, just stay on it. It's not easy, um, especially when it comes to writing. It's not easy to keep doing it. It feels, especially the first time you're trying to complete something like a book, it's like, how do I finish something like this? I do have a friend who recently wrote his own fiction story. I'm really excited for him, and I'm going to help him, get it all edited and packaged together so he can, put it online as well. But yeah, and it took him a long time too. It took him a few years, and it took me a few years to come out with my first book. So I'd say, just be dedicated. And I guess the other thing would be like any tool that you find helpful, like leverage that to the fullest. Like one thing I do is I'll put on headphones when I'm writing, and I'll find music that matches the mood of the scene or the story, and that's really helpful for me. So if you find any tool that's really, really useful for you, like use it all the time. And seek out tools, like seek out different ways to be, whether it's more organized or more disciplined, or interviews of other creators to hear what they do. That was another big thing for me. Brandon Sanderson has his lectures from his university lectures that he teaches. Like he posts them online, so you can listen to all of his lectures on storytelling. And so I would listen to all of those because it's like a free guide on how to write successfully, and not just from a business sense, but also in the story and plot and development itself. So I think it's really important that you also seek out people who've done it well, and then in whatever field you're getting into, and then seeing what success looks like so you can emulate it.
Are there any causes or missions or any charities that you deeply admire and would like to mention?
Sure, I guess. I've been asked that before. There is a local group that is called the Blue Hero Project. They provide like just snacks and equipment and everything to different police departments. So, being a former police officer, that's something that really resonates with me. The Seattle Police Foundation's great. They provide a lot of really good equipment and equipment that's beneficial for the public. Like they provide extra tourniquets. They provide like a lot of the aid equipment and a lot of the equipment that's used to help injured people on scene. Because I know, being a police officer, we always got there first. That was always the way it was. So having that aid equipment to help people is huge, and most of that equipment that they use to provide life-saving aid is given to them from the Seattle Police Foundation, and people who are generous enough to donate there. So I think those are two things for me that are really important. Just the fact that, if you consider, if you're in a moment, let's say you got shot or stabbed, or you fell down and you have a really bad wound. Like I know there was someone I ran into one time. He had a really bad wound from just like a really bad fall. It's like, you get there right away and you want to have equipment to help render aid. And so to me, it's like you're really reinvesting back in your own community, because it's like that's life-saving equipment that can be used to help you and your friends and family. So
Where can people find you and your literary works?
Amazon and Barnes and Noble online. If you search Bryan Asher, Bryan with a Y, you can find them on there. I have the ebooks and print books on both of those websites. I do have my audiobooks on Amazon. If you go on Spotify, I also have my first audiobook on there. I haven't imported my second audiobook on there, but you can find pretty much everything on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, depending on which platform you use. I would say the best one to buy from probably is Amazon, because it ships and prints the quickest. So I would say they're probably the best route to go for ebook or audiobook. But if you are a Barnes and Noble and you use Nook for your ebooks, I have them on there. So
Fantastic. All right. Is there anything else you'd like to add that you didn't get a chance to talk about?
I think I covered most of it, honestly. This was really cool. It was a unique conversation because it's just talking about something different. We don't always get to share kind of our passions on things, mine being especially nerdy. So it was cool to get to share like my perspective on fandom stuff. And I love sharing, like I listen to a lot of interviews of people I like. And so I share a lot of creator anecdote stories because I find those old like war stories really fascinating. So
Thank you so much for joining me today. This was awesome. I was so excited and I was so happy that you even wanted to come on the podcast.
yeah, happy to. No, this is great. I love it. I think this is super fun. So
This is
yeah.
exciting. Exciting for me.